Hi everybody, happy Monday. It's Ashley Bradford with Piano Lessons for Adults program. I teach a wonderful group of students, adult learners from all over the world. We do weekly private one-on-one lessons with them. We have a lovely community. And then we've been doing these once a week tips, video tips. So thank you so much for all of you who are following and commenting and sending suggestions and participating in this really growing group of online learners and community. It's great to have everybody. So today, let's talk about practice makes permanent. I know we hear practice makes perfect, but that is furthest from the truth. And we can talk about research behind that in the future. But for now, we're just going to take that truth for face value, that practice makes permanent. And we're going to talk about what this means to our daily work and ways to practice what we actually want to ultimately be doing so that we are putting into permanency what we want to be putting into permanency. Okay, so first of all, I have a little story for you about Mozart, and then we're going to talk about 3 ways to actually practice what you want to be making permanent. So first of all, Mozart's story. So what I mean by this practice makes permanent versus practice makes perfect. You know, when you sit down to work on something, you really want to be efficient. We don't want to be playing, practicing, working, doing something that is not the way that we want to do it. So let me give you an example of this. Let's say that we sit down to, quote unquote, to learn to get down our primary triads in the key of E major. And we're going to sit down and we're going to play those, right? And the ultimate goal there is to be able to play the primary triads in the key of E major. So as we sit down to practice that, practice is going to make permanent, not necessarily perfect. So if you are going from one chord to another chord and you keep quote unquote missing it, messing up, not actually landing on the triad that you're trying to land on, that your goal is to land on, then you're going to be laying down errors in your thought process. So you're actually practicing errors instead of practicing what you want to be practicing. So I say, don't practice, play, right? And play for your objective. Play for what you're actually seeking to make permanent. So if the objective is, I want to be able to play the primary triads in E major, then we need to set up a practice strategy to make permanent the ability to play the primary triads in E major. Now, we can quote unquote practice doing that 72 times in a row, and maybe 50 times we land on the wrong chords and 22 times we land on the right chords. Well, now we've made permanent 50 wrong ones to a ratio of 22 right ones. That's not where we're going with this. So practice makes permanent. So we want to actually practice what it is that we are trying to play. Now, let me give you a Mozart story about this. This is a story that I read when I was really young. It was in an obscure library in a little small town, in some book that I came across, because, I was one of those nerdy piano kids. I'll always read in all kinds of practice tips and what have you. So I have no idea what the book was. I have no idea if this was actually a true story or not, all right? But I read this in some obscure book in some library in a small town decades ago, all right? Whether it's true or not, this little anecdote really, really, really has helped me over the decades. This is the way the story goes. It is said that Mozart, when he sat down to practice, insisted that he play exactly what he was intending to play 18 times in a row. And if he was on time 18 and played something different than he had intended, then he would go all the way back to the beginning and start again at 1. So he had a little jar on one side of his piano and another jar on the other side of his piano, and 18 pennies in this jar. And whatever he was practicing, he'd play it once, and if it was exactly the way that he had intended to play it, he would take a penny and put it into the jar on the other side of the piano. Play it again. If it was exactly the way that he was intending, put the second penny on the other side. This is the way that he would keep track of his 18 times. And if he was all the way on the 18th time and he did something that he wasn't intending to do, practice makes permanent, remember? So if he did something that he wasn't intending to make permanent, then he would dump all the pennies back and he would start again at 1. Whether he actually did that or not, I don't know. But when I read this as a child, I just thought, wow, that I want to do that. That's how I want to practice. That's how I want to do work at the piano. And the principle there is really important because practice makes permanent. So Mozart, or in this story, Mozart was thinking that ahead of time, thinking through ahead of time, what is it that I want to do? And I'm going to do it exactly that way 18 times in a row. To really, really focus on playing accurately. And not just letting the fingers go rogue, as I say. So there's an anecdote. Let me give you 3 factors that can affect this, this ability to play precisely each time. So if we say, well, okay, I'm going to sit down to this song in front of me and I'm going to play this thing from beginning to end 18 times exactly the way that I want to play it, and then that's going to be permanent. That's a really big chunk to think that you're going to get everything from beginning to end in that song exactly the way that you want it 18 times in a row. So portion size is one factor. Consider the portion. When you're sitting down to work on something, consider the portion that you are chunking off to work on. Is that a portion that is reasonable to play without doing things that you really weren't intending to do? Secondly, speed. If I'm going to sit down and play this thing up to tempo from beginning to end 18 times in a row, exactly the way I want to do it, the way I want to make it permanent, am I going to be able to get it that accurate 18 times in a row at that speed? So speed is the second factor. Third factor, the complexity. The complexity of the work that we are seeking to approach. Is that complexity, is it so complex that maybe I'm not going to be able to do it 18 times in a row exactly the way that I was intending? Now I'm using that 18 as an example just to get us thinking. Can I do it twice in a row? That portion at that speed, at that complexity. Can I do it twice in a row exactly the way that I was intending? So let me give you an example of this. So let's say we're sitting down and we're saying, just like I said, I'm going to work out, I'm going to play the primary triads in the key of E major. And I'm really going to get those suckers down. And I'm really going to get comfortable playing through those. The goal is not, all right, I'm going to play them 72 times in a row, as I said. And 50 times I didn't land on the right chords, and 22 times I did. No. Let's choose a portion, a speed, and a complexity that will enable us to execute the way that we want to lay it into permanency. So let's say that we sit down to play these primary triads in E major and we're choosing a portion. Well, maybe trying to get from a 1 to a 4 to a 5, back to a 4, back to a 1, maybe that's too much of a chunk as far as portion to do it first. Maybe we say, well, first, I'm just going to do tonic to dominant. Let me just work on that for a second. Just getting from tonic to dominant. So I already have reduced the portion from 1 to 4 to 5 to 4 to 1, just to 1 to 5. Reduce the portion. You say, okay, I can land that and get that really, really accurate because practice makes permanent. So I don't want to land on all kinds of chords that I'm not looking to make permanent. So let's make tonic to dominant really permanent. Number 2, speed. So I've got my metronome ticking and I'm trying to get from tonic to dominant in 1 tick. Hey, reduce that sucker down. Let's choose a speed that's really, really doable. Maybe I say 4 ticks. Maybe I say I'm going to sit on tonic for 4 ticks and I'm going to think this through and I'm going to find dominant. I'm really going to find it and visualize it and wait for 4 ticks and I'm going to come to it. 4 ticks. That's greatly reducing the speed. So at that point we've reduced portion from 1, 4, 5, 4, 1 down to just 1, 5. We've reduced speed from 1 chord per tick, reduced it to 1 chord, 4 ticks. Third, complexity. Maybe instead of playing the entire chord, maybe we just play the root and we say, hey, I'm going to play the root of the tonic chord and I move my hand up and I'm going to play the root of the dominant chord. There we've reduced the complexity. Root of tonic, root of dominant, root of tonic, root of dominant, root of tonic. There I've reduced complexity. So portion, speed, and complexity. Practice makes permanent. So strategically think. Don't just play something over and over and over and over again and half of the time it wasn't what you were intending. Stop and think. Am I choosing a portion of work? Am I choosing a speed of work? And am I choosing a complexity of work that will enable me to make permanent exactly what I want to make permanent? Think of little Mozart, that story. Think of if you had to do it 18 times in a row exactly the way you wanted. Have you chosen a portion, a speed, and a complexity that would lend itself to 18 repetitions in a row just the way that you intend them to be for permanency? So there's our example, and there's something to think about this week. There are many other ways and many other examples that you could give for portion, for speed, and complexity. But let me just take this down one level deeper for you before we go, and then you can think of other examples. Let's say that then you have used that portion of tonic to dominant, and you've kind of gotten that down. And let's say you want to then scale up and say, okay, so now I'm going to go from 1 to 4 to 5. So that would be an increase in portion. And I'm just going to go 1 to 4 to 5. If you're going to then increase your speed, maybe you're going to take it from 4 ticks per chord to maybe now go 3 ticks per chord and work it there for a few times. If you're going to increase complexity, instead of just the root of the chord, maybe you say, I'm going to work on the root and the third of the chord in the key of E. Tonic to dominant, or tonic to subdominant to dominant. Just working root and third. That would be an increase in complexity. As we go back and increase portion. Maybe we say, all right, I got 1, 4, 5 down. Now I'm going to do 1, 4, 5, 4. I'm going to work that portion. Maybe the speed, maybe I'm going to take it from 3 ticks to 2 ticks per chord. Maybe complexity, I'm going to take it from a root in a third of the chord to maybe a root in the fifth of the chord, and work that portion for a little bit. 1, 4, 5. And then finally, then we work it up and say, okay, great. Now I'm going to reach the portion. Now I think probably I could do 18 times in a row if I needed to. Accurately, a full portion. 1, 4, 5, 4, 1. With a speed of maybe 1 tick per chord. Tick, 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 tick. And maybe a complexity of an entire triad. Root, third, fifth, all the way through. So there's an example for you of layering your practice sessions, making choices. Think about little Mozart. Think about yourself. If you put a jar on one side of the piano, a different jar on the other side of the piano, and insisted that you did something 18 times in a row the way that you would want to make it permanent. I'm not necessarily suggesting you need to do that, especially as an adult. You have to do anything that is not enjoyable to you. But I'm just setting that as a example for you of strategy and really thinking it through before you just let your fingers go rogue, because you don't want to work things that aren't what you want to do. You don't want 12 good ones and 20 bad ones. Right? You want 2 good ones. That's good. That's great. 2 good ones. Boom. How are you going to get 2 good ones? How are you going to get 3 good ones and no bad ones? How are you going to get 5 good ones and no bad ones? I don't like to use good and bad, but you know what I'm saying there. How are you going to get where you want to be every single time, right in the middle of the bullseye? Strategically. Think portion size, think speed, think complexity. Break it down. If you can't get a few exactly where you want them in a row, then you have chosen a portion too large, and or speed too fast, and or a complexity too great. So take down one of those areas or all of those areas to a place where you can practice for permanence and get it exactly the way you want it every single time. And then inch up and increase your strategy from there. So there you go, something to think about. Thank you for all of your comments as we go through, and continue to let me know other things that you want to learn about. I've been doing Mondays, so I'll probably keep popping on here on Mondays and giving you guys little practice tips. Again, I'm Ashley Bradford on the web at SkypeAdultPianoLessons.com, here on Facebook also at Skype Adult Piano Lessons. Have a wonderful week. Happy playing, happy working on your piano this week. Have a good time with that, and we'll see you all next week.